Hello, Peter the Cat here again. Garfield and I have been watching a bunch of Star Wars Explained videos, and Garfield suggested the idea to me that we do like a Garfield Explained video. So I decided to do something kind of like Mythbusters, the top 10 myths about Garfield. Here we go. Number 1, Garfield is genderless. Status, false. Now this was started by some satirist dude, Virgil Texas, and he started to troll Wikipedia and tried to edit it to say that Garfield was genderless because Jim.Davis said in this interview years ago that Garfield is neither male nor female. Now, in context, Davis was actually talking about Garfield's universal appeal. I think Jim.Davis has said something like this before on the Garfield Comic Book Maker CD. I can't watch it because it won't run on my computer. So you'll just have to take my word for it. Anyway, Garfield is male. It's just some really weird over-interpreting of something Jim.Davis said, so it's not something to get really worked up over. Now, this isn't the first time there's been some gender confusion over a Garfield character. Number 2, Nermal is female. Status, false. Now, a lot of people think Nermal is a girl because of the feminine voice on Garfield and Friends and the eyelashes. But in reality, this might seem really weird, but Nermal is actually a boy. There's a few comics where he's called a he, and for an easy example, I don't know if it's easily seen, but it says right here, Nermal's superhero self, Abnormal, is a male. Yeah. So, and I thought Nermal was a girl for a long time also until I saw a few comics where Nermal's called a boy. And I think that, in the more current cartoons like the Garfield show and in the Garfield movie, Nermal has a male voice, so it should be more clear now. Maybe Nermal's hit puberty. I don't know. Number 3, Jim.Davis doesn't actually draw the comic. Status, partly true. Okay, he'll come up with the outlines for comics, but the actual comics you see in the newspaper, those were done by his assistants. And Jim.Davis is actually pretty open about this. If you read books like the 20th anniversary book, he'll mention his assistants. And on the Garfield Gets Real DVD, there's a behind the scenes thing that shows Jim.Davis, handing his comics over to other artists. It is kind of disappointing, but at least Jim.Davis is upfront about, that the Garfield comic is a team effort. Number 4, the godlike figure at the end of Garfield's 9 Lives is played by Jim.Davis. Status, false. I think I might have read this on IMDb years ago or something, that this was a misconception. But believe it or not, the godlike figure in Garfield's 9 Lives is not actually played by Jim.Davis. It's some guy named Lindsay Workman. Yeah, someone else completely. I guess in the same way that Jim.Davis, has assistants who draw the comic for him, he has assistants who will play him in TV and in movies or something. Is there anything Jim.Davis actually does do on his own? I don't know, when he goes golfing, is there some assistant who golfs for him? I don't know. Number 5, the Garfield Caught in the Act video game has lost levels. Status, true. Been a while since I last played this. Now, there's this forum called The Lost Levels that talks about cut content in video games, and there's a thread about missing levels from the game Garfield Caught in the Act, and there were some extra levels for the Sega channel, but now they're totally gone. But there's still evidence that these lost levels did once exist. T-shirts for Garfield Caught in the Act have Garfield in costumes that are missing from the final game. The Game Gear version has some levels that aren't in either the Genesis version or the PC port. And the PC version of the game has an outer space level that's missing in the Genesis game. However, a space rocket can still be seen on the title screen of both versions of the game, although the rocket item in the PC port looks kind of different. So the outer space stage might have been cut at the last moment or something, I don't know. And there's a Viking helmet also, probably a remnant of the Viking stage that was left in the Game Gear version. It's really interesting to read about, and we may never see these, Sega channel levels ever again. Number 6, Bill Murray was cast in the Garfield movie as an homage to Lorenzo Music voicing Peter Venkman on The Real Ghostbusters. Status, false. Yeah, it's something I'd like to believe, but it's not true. If you've seen the Nostalgia Critics review of the Garfield movie, he explains the actual reason. Bill Murray thought one of the writers for the Garfield movie was Joel Cohen of the Coen brothers, but it turned out it was actually another Joel Cohen with a similar name, and it turned out to be one of Bill Murray's biggest mistakes. And this isn't actually the only Garfield Ghostbusters connection. There's some other ones, for example, there's this Garfield video game, Garfield Labyrinth, that was in Europe, a Garfield game, but in the United States it was a real Ghostbusters game, and for some reason in Japan it was a Mickey Mouse game. Kind of weird. And then Garfield's current voice actor, Frank Welker, was the voice of Ray Stantz in the Real Ghostbusters, and the 2016 Ghostbusters movie, the reboot that nobody liked, it references Garfield briefly, so that's pretty cool. What is it with you and Ghostbusters, Garfield? Is it a cartoon you really like or something? Number 7. Cartoon All-Stars The Rescue has never been re-aired or released on DVD because Garfield appeared in the cartoon without Jim.Davis' permission. Status: false. This is debunked on the TV Tropes page for that terrible cartoon. Jim.Davis was aware of the cartoon and did give permission for Garfield. And if this was true, it's kind of weird to think that, Garfield would be animated and voiced by Lorenzo music and, Jim.Davis would, have no idea about it. But, the real reason I think it's never been released, is probably, maybe conflicting copyrights over the Muppet Babies and Chipmunks and everything else. Plus, it's just terrible and out of date. I wouldn't really want to see it released, and neither does Garfield. Yeah, he doesn't really want to remember it. Number 8. The 1989 Garfield Halloween comics indicate that Garfield is either dead, dying, hallucinating, or whatever creepypasta theory you want to believe. Status: false. Yeah, I had to address this eventually, but, this is known as one of the creepiest Garfield comics ever. For those of you who've never read it, it's basically a week of Garfield comics where Garfield is alone in his home, and he has no idea where anyone is, and at the end, it turns out he was just, dreaming or something, and a lot of people were, freaked out and wondered what the heck was going on. And, because of creepypastas going around saying, oh, this character is actually hallucinating the whole story and everything, people came up with bizarre interpretations. But it turns out, the actual explanation is a lot simpler. Jim.Davis has said in the Garfield 20th Anniversary book that the real inspiration was he went around asking, his employees at Paws Inc., what scared them, because he wanted to do some comics that would genuinely scare people. And the most common answer he got was, being alone or dying alone, things like that. So, sorry, creepypasta fans. Yeah, it's just, Jim.Davis doing some creepy comics. He's not, secretly having Garfield hallucinate or whatever you want to believe. Yeah, sorry. Number 9. The Halloween comics were based on the film Allegro Non Troppo. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Status: false. Yeah, the Garfield Halloween comics are so messed up, I had to include, put it on this list twice. But, anyway, this cartoon, Allegro Non Troppo, it's got this ghost cat in an abandoned house, and some people, there are some bloggers who think that, this might have inspired Jim.Davis's Halloween comics, but in 2006, BoingBoing.net had an email exchange with someone who had met Jim.Davis and asked him about the Halloween comics. Jim.Davis denied that the comics were based on any cartoons. It's a nice theory, but I have to say, myth busted on this one. And finally, number 10, there is a lost Garfield movie. Status: true. Yep. It's called Garfield's Judgment Day. I did a reading about it a while ago. And if you look up the Garfield TV special, Happy Birthday Garfield, it was for his 10th anniversary, you'll see a brief making of thing showing a song being recorded. And one of Garfield's producers, John Cowley, I think his name is, he did a whole blog post about, why the movie was never made. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. Will we ever see Garfield's, Judgment Day come out in, maybe a comic book by Kaboom Comics or something? I don't know. It's probably never going to come out, I'm afraid to say, unless the upcoming 2018 Garfield movie, readapts it or something. Anyway, that's the whole list. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope, Master, that you are pleased with me. Anyway, Peter the Cat here. Bye, everybody. And look for me at BLFC. I don't have a table again this year, but that means I'm able to roam around freely, so come and say hi to me.